Assalamu alaikum. Hope that I'm talking to relaxed, confident, and hardworking students of mine. I keep on telling you that I miss you. I miss you, my classrooms. Inshallah, the brighter days will come. Today we are starting in HIST204. This is the 8th week and 21st lecture. And we are going to talk about the society in the 1980s. This is a changing society, a very comfortable society, affluent society when America was really in a progressive mode of life. And when I use progressive, I'm not using these terms in political terms. It's like an adjective, moving on, looking to future, having a sustainability in their own present at that time, the life that they were living. The first thing that made the society a changed society was that the population was expanding rapidly. In 1960, it was 200 millions, and in 1980s, it touched to 250 millions. And experts observed startling shifts within the expanding mass. So this one indication of this expanding population was the admission of Hawaii and Alaska to the Union in 1959, and more significant was the growth of the Sun Belt, Florida, and the states of Southwest. California added more than 5 million to its numbers between 1950 and 1960, and in 1963 it passed New York to become the most populous state in the Union. If we think about the climate of the Southwest, it was particularly attractive to older people, and the population growth reflected the prosperity that enabled pensioners and other retired persons to settle there. The advances in transportation and communication added to geographical mobility. So in the post-war decades, the automobile appeared to enter in its golden age. In booming 1920s, when the car became an instrument of mass transportation, about 31 million autos were produced by American factories. And during 1960s, 77 million rolled off on the assembly line. Gasoline use rose sharply. The more mobile population drove further in more reliable and more comfortable vehicle over smoother and less congested highways. And the development of the interstate highway system, begun under Eisenhower in 1956, was a major cause of increased mobility. The new roads did far more than facilitate long-distance travel. They accelerated the shift of population to the suburbs and the consequent decline of inner-city districts. So although commercial air travel had existed in 1930s, it truly came of age when the first jetliner, the Boeing 707, went into service in 1958. Almost immediately, jets began to dominate long-distance travel, whereas railroads, passenger service, and transatlantic liners declined in importance because air travel was saving time. And then the biggest thing that happened was the advent of television. By 1961, there were 55 million sets in operation, and by 1960s, there were both government and commercial satellites in orbit. And interestingly, television combined the immediacy of radio with the visual impact of films and displayed most of the strengths and weaknesses of both in exaggerated form. Some excellent drama was presented, especially on the National Educational Television Network, but the lion's share of television time was devoted to uninspired and vulgar serials, routine variety shows, giveaways and quiz programs designed to reveal and revel in the ignorance of the average citizen. By all this, the impact was that the middle class was growing at this point of time. And this was the post-war change, that the broadening of the middle class started. The percentage of immigrants in the population declined steadily. In 1965, more than 95% of all the Americans were native born. The trend contributed to social and cultural uniformity. So did the rising incomes of industrial workers and the changing character of their labor. Blue-collar workers invaded the middle class by the tens of thousands. They moved to suburbs previously reserved for junior executives, and they shed their work clothes for business suits. They took up golf, and some they adopted values and attitudes commensurate with their new status, which help explain the growing conservatism of labor unions. And in these changing times, let's see how the religion was having its role played in the society. Sociologists and other commentators found in the expansion of the middle class another explanation of the tendency of the country to glorify the conformist. They attributed to this expansion the national obsession with moderation and consensus. Organized religion deals with eternal values, but it is influenced by social, cultural, and economic developments. After World War II, the major faiths, despite their differences, were affected. And the civil rights movement also had important religious implications in it. Nearly all the denominations played a significant role in the fight for racial justice and erupted after the Supreme Court outlawed segregation, as we have discussed in the last week. All the social changes of the period had religion ramifications, and scientific and technological developments also affected both religious values and the way people worshipped. On another level, the prestige of secular science gave Darwin's theory a kind of religious aspect, disturbing to some church leaders. Medical advances that some people marveled at, such as in vitro fertilization of human eggs, organ transplants, and the development of machines capable of keeping terminally ill people alive, indefinitely seemed to others against nature. And we need those machines very badly these days. Radio and television had more direct effects on organized religion. The airwaves enabled rhetorically skilled preachers to reach millions with emotionally charged messages on religious topics and also on political and social questions. And when we come to think about how was literature and art, so for a time after World War II, the nation seemed on the verge of a literary outburst comparable to which followed World War I. The Norman Mailer's book, The Naked and the Dead, 1948, and James Jones' From Here to Eternity, 1951. These were on the military experiences of young writers that appeared. The young writers' wariness towards the adult world reflected both the post-war idealization of adolescence and widespread fear of sober responsibilities of adulthood. All these novelists that were writing at that time, and a number of others whose books were of lesser quality than Harry and the Updike. I'm forgetting his name. Harry is Harry Angstrom and John Updike. All these books that were written years after years, sales of books increased despite much talk about how television and other diversions were undermining the public's interest in reading. This is my concern today. The expansion of the book market, like so many other changes, was not an unalloyed benefit even for writers. American painters did not lag behind, and they were also affected by the same forces that influenced writers to the past. The greatest American artist had been shaped by European influences. After World War II, the situation changed dramatically with the emergence of abstract expressionism or action painting, which is known as the New York School, represented by John Pollock. And the pace of change in artistic fashions were dizzying, far more rapid than changes in literature. As with literature, the effects of such success were not all healthy. Successful artists became national personalities, a few of them becoming enormously rich. For these, each new work was exposed to the glare of publicity, sometimes with uninformed results. The progress is always not smooth, it has its own perils. So if we see American society more broadly at that time, two dilemmas seem to have emerged. One was that progress was often self-defeating. Reforms and innovation instituted with the best of motives often made things worse rather than better. And the second dilemma was that the modern industrialist society placed an enormous premium on social cooperation, at the same time undermining the individual citizen's sense of being essential to the proper functioning of society. And the economy was becoming complicated as a fine watch. A breakdown in any one sector had ramifications that spread swiftly to other sectors. Such dilemmas produced a paradox. The United States was the most powerful nation in the world, its people the best educated, richest, probably the most energetic. American society was technologically advanced and dynamic. American traditional values idealistic, humane, and democratic. Looks so ideal. Yet the nation seemed incapable of mobilizing its resources to confront the most obvious challenges. President Johnson recognized this problem. He hoped to solve it by establishing a consensus and building his great society. While we are talking about the perils of prosperity, let's talk about the cost of prosperity. Economic expansion results in a large measure from technological advances, and these two proved to be mixed blessings. As we have seen, World War II need stimulated the development of plastic like nylon, synthetic rubber, and of rather television and other electronic devices. And we are facing the consequences of all that plastics. The vast outpouring of flimsy plastic products and the increased use of paper, metal foil, and other disposable packaging material seems about to bury the country beneath mountains of trash. We are raising voice about it now, we, the humans of the world. Above all, technology increased the capacity of the earth to support people. As population increased, production and consumption increased, exhausting supplies of raw materials and speeding the pollution of air and water resources. And it also gave way to racial turmoil. The Student Nonviolent Coordination Committee, as we talked last time, which had been born out of the struggle for racial integration, had become by the mid-60s a radical organization openly scornful of interracial cooperation. The movement should be black staffed, black controlled, and black financed. By 1966, it was being said. So this middle-class city residents of America often resented what seemed the favoritism of the federal government and of state and local administration, which sought affirmative action to provide blacks with economic opportunities and social benefits. Efforts to desegregate ghetto schools of busing children out of their local neighborhoods was particularly bitter cause of conflict. And a native-born ethnicity was taking shape.